The morning was quiet, kind of quiet that made the small apartment feel like it belonged to the world outside more than anyone inside. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the sunlight spilling through the thin curtains, and let her thoughts wander. Her mind always seemed to dance around music, like it had its own rhythm she couldn't control. Even before she had learned the piano, even before she had touched the first keys, music had been part of her life. She could hear it everywhere in the hum of the refrigerator, the birds outside her window, even in the way rain tapped on the roof. It was natural for her, almost as natural as breathing. She had never thought much about performing for others. Music, to her, was private. It was a sanctuary, a space where she could think, dream, and sometimes even cry. The piano in the corner of her living room had been her companion for years. Its keys were familiar, worn from hours of practice and midnight explorations. She would sit for hours, her fingers moving over the ivory keys, creating melodies that felt like they belonged to her and her alone. But today was different. A message had arrived the night before. Short and simple, but it had filled her with a storm of feelings. A family friend, someone she had known in passing, had asked her to play the piano at a wedding. Not just any wedding, but one that promised a crowd, a large room, a formal gathering. They had said, "We need someone who can bring the moment to life. Can you do it?" She had stared at the message for what felt like an eternity, her heart beating faster with each passing second. Could she do it? She was not used to performing in front of strangers. She was not used to being the center of attention. The thought of people watching her, listening to her every note, made her stomach twist with anxiety. Yet beneath that anxiety, there was a spark of quiet, insistent thrill. The idea of sharing her music, of creating a moment that would stay in people's hearts, stirred something she had never felt before. All through the morning, she thought about it. She walked around her apartment, touching the piano as if seeking reassurance from it. She remembered the small competitions she had joined years ago. They had been local low-pressure events, and even there, she had felt nervous. She had won a few awards, yes, but each time, the victory had felt different. It was not the applause or the recognition she loved. It was the feeling of creating something beautiful from nothing. The sensation of connecting with the music so deeply that it seemed to flow through her rather than from her. She sat down at the piano and let her hands hover above the keys, as if feeling the invisible threads of a song waiting to be discovered. The apartment was quiet, and yet she could almost hear the imagined audience in her mind. She imagined the wedding hall full of guests in bright dresses and sharp suits. The hum of conversation, the anticipation of the ceremony. She imagined herself sitting there, poised, ready to play, and suddenly the fear returned. What if she made a mistake? What if she faltered, and everyone noticed? But the thought of not trying, of keeping her music hidden, felt worse. It was strange the way fear and excitement could feel so intertwined, almost inseparable. She leaned back and closed her eyes, letting herself breathe, letting the music inside her rise without pressure, without judgment. She remembered the small moments that had brought her to this point, long nights practicing in silence. The thrill of discovering a new piece, the satisfaction of mastering a difficult passage. All of that had led to this. All of that had prepared her for this moment. Even if she did not realize it at first, she got up and went to the kitchen, making a cup of tea. The warm liquid calmed her nerves a little, and she stared out of the window at the street below. Children were playing, their laughter ringing through the air. A car honked somewhere in the distance. Life went on, ordinary and chaotic, while she sat here, grappling with the extraordinary opportunity that had landed in her lap. She thought about the bride and groom, people she barely knew, trusting her to create a perfect moment for them, a memory that would last a lifetime. The weight of that trust was heavy, but it also carried a strange, wonderful honor. By noon, she had made her decision. She would do it. She would play at the wedding. Not because she was confident, not because she knew she could be perfect, but because she loved music enough to risk the fear. She loved it enough to share it, to let it reach beyond her private world and touch someone else. She sat back at the piano, this time with purpose, her fingers tracing the keys, feeling the familiar warmth of the instrument beneath her touch. The preparation began immediately. She dug out old sheet music, revisiting pieces she had loved in the past. Some were classical, intricate and elegant, full of emotion hidden in every note. Others were modern, flowing and light, capable of lifting spirits with a single melody. She tried each piece, listening carefully to how it sounded in her apartment, imagining how it would feel in a large hall. Some felt right instantly. Others felt wrong, too heavy or too casual for the moment she wanted to create. Hours passed, and she lost herself in the music. Her initial nervousness slowly transformed into focus. Her hands moved with precision, yet with freedom, as if they had their own memory of the keys. She played, stopped, replayed sections, adjusted, experimented. The piano became not just an instrument, but a conversation partner. Each note she played was a word, each phrase a sentence, each piece a story waiting to be told. By the afternoon, she began to feel the first hints of confidence. Not arrogance, not the kind of confidence that comes from believing you are the best, but the quiet certainty that she could meet the challenge, that she could create something meaningful. She took breaks, of course, stepping away from the piano to stretch, to eat, to rest her mind. But always her thoughts returned to the wedding, to the moment when she would sit at the piano and fill the room with music. Evening came, and she found herself reflecting on her life so far. Music had always been her companion, her refuge, her way of understanding the world. She remembered the first time she had truly felt the power of it, the way a simple melody could make her laugh, cry, or simply pause in awe. She remembered the teachers who had guided her, small victories and failures that had shaped her skill and her love for the instrument. Every experience had led her here, to this small but monumental decision. Night settled in, and she finally sat at the piano again, alone with her thoughts and the keys. She closed her eyes and let her fingers find a melody without thinking, without planning. It was imperfect, yes, but it was alive. She smiled softly, realizing that this was what she loved, the unpredictability, the vulnerability, the honest expression of something bigger than herself. She felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was about to step into the unknown, but she knew, somehow, that she was ready before she went to bed. She wrote a few notes on a scrap of paper, reminders to herself: breathe, listen, feel, don't think too much. Let the music speak. She pinned it to the wall above her piano, a small anchor for her nerves. Then she lay down, staring at the ceiling, imagining the wedding hall, imagining the people, imagining the moment when her music would begin and silence would follow. She drifted to sleep, not completely calm, but filled with a sense of purpose she had never felt before, and in that quiet apartment. Under the soft glow of the streetlights outside, she dreamed of music that could speak louder than words, that could reach hearts without a single syllable. She dreamed of the first note she would play at the wedding, the way it would echo in the hall, the way it would ripple through the crowd, pausing them, touching them, holding them in a moment that belonged only to the music. It was just the beginning. The first step in a journey that would test her, challenge her, and ultimately show her the power of her gift. She did not yet know how it would feel to sit before strangers, to let them listen, to let them feel. But she did know one thing: she could not ignore this call. Music had led her here, and she would answer. The night was quiet, but in her heart, a storm of music played on, soft at first, then louder, insistent, full of promise. And she slept, ready to meet the morning, ready to meet the challenge, ready to let the piano speak the words she could not. The next morning, she woke with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The sunlight streamed through the curtains, spilling across the piano in the corner of the room. It felt alive somehow, as if the piano knew today was different. She made her way over, brushing her fingers lightly across the keys. The touch was familiar, comforting, but the anticipation in her chest made her hands tremble ever so slightly. She knew she had to prepare. This was not a casual performance anymore. A wedding was a place full of emotions, expectations, and memories in the making. People would be looking for perfection, or at least something that felt perfect to them. She understood that she couldn't play the way she usually did at home, without thought or care, simply letting her emotions guide her. She needed to shape her music carefully, to craft it so it would carry the feelings of the moment into the hearts of the listeners. Sitting down at the piano, she opened her notebook where she had written ideas the night before. Each page was full of scribbles, half-formed melodies, notes on rhythm, dynamics, and emotion. Some pieces were simple and gentle, meant to comfort and soothe. Others were bold, full of energy, designed to uplift and excite. She ran her fingers over the keys, testing the feel, trying to imagine how each note would land in a larger space with more people listening. Hours passed as she experimented with different pieces. She played slowly, carefully listening to each chord, each transition. Some melodies that had always come easily now seemed stiff, unfeeling. Others that had been rough sketches began to reveal their potential. She started to see the music, not just as sound, but as storytelling. Each song had a role to play in the wedding, the walk down the aisle, the exchange of vows, the small, quiet moments in between. She paused for a moment, resting her hands on her lap. Her thoughts wandered to the people she would be playing for. She didn't know them well, but she imagined the bride walking slowly, nervously, heart racing, smiling through tears. She imagined the groom holding her hand, waiting, filled with love and hope. She thought about the parents, the friends, all the people gathered in the room, each one carrying their own story, their own emotions. How could she reach all of them at once? How could she make them feel the beauty, the warmth, and the love that she imagined for this day? Her fingers returned to the keys instinctively. She played the melody slowly, letting the notes linger. The sound filled the room, soft but confident. It was not perfect, but it was honest. And honesty, she realized, was what mattered most. Perfection would not create emotion. Only truth could do that. She closed her eyes and let herself feel the music, imagining the wedding unfolding in front of her mind's eye. Throughout the day, she practiced in cycles, playing, stopping, adjusting. Her mind was full of small details she needed to consider: the tempo, the dynamics, where to pause, how to end the piece so it felt complete without abruptness. She experimented with combinations of notes she had never tried before, sometimes failing, and sometimes discovering something wonderful and unexpected. Each mistake was a lesson, and each discovery was a spark of hope. By midday, fatigue started to set in. Her hands ached slightly, and her back reminded her that she had been sitting for hours, but she refused to stop. She moved around the apartment, stretching, walking, thinking about the music from different angles. She hummed the melodies as she moved, letting them settle in her mind. The music was no longer just in her fingers. It was in her thoughts, in her heartbeat, in the way she imagined the wedding unfolding. During a brief break, she sat by the window, sipping tea and watching the world outside. Children ran along the street, laughing and shouting. Cars passed by, carrying strangers she would never meet. Life went on in its ordinary way, and yet her mind was consumed by the extraordinary task ahead. She smiled to herself, realizing how strange it was to feel both ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. Her life had always been quiet, predictable, full of small routines. But today, everything felt alive with possibility. She picked up an old piece of sheet music.
One she had not played in years.
The notes were familiar but challenging. As she played, she remembered why she had loved it so much, the way it built slowly. The delicate balance between softness and strength, the unexpected moments of surprise. It was a piece full of emotion, and she realized it could be perfect for one of the quiet moments at the wedding. She spent hours learning it again, shaping it so that it would carry just the right feeling. Evening came, and she lit a small lamp by the piano. The soft glow made the apartment feel like a little sanctuary, a place where nothing existed outside of her music. She played one piece after another, sometimes letting the music flow naturally, sometimes stopping to correct a mistake or adjust a rhythm. She was meticulous, but she also allowed herself moments of freedom, letting her intuition guide her fingers. At one point, she stopped and closed her eyes, letting the silence fill the room. The silence was different from fear. It was calm, almost sacred. She thought about the wedding again, imagining the guests holding their breath, the moment when she would begin to play. She tried to picture the feelings she wanted them to have, the warmth, the joy, the sense of connection. She realized that the silence in the room would be just as important as the music itself. The pauses, the quiet moments, the spaces between notes, they would carry meaning as much as the notes themselves. Late into the night, she practiced the same melody again and again, shaping it until it felt right. Her hands ached, her mind was tired, but she felt a growing sense of confidence. She was not perfect, and she did not need to be. What mattered was the feeling, the connection, the honesty of her music. She imagined the first note echoing through the wedding hall, and a thrill ran through her body. This was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when all the small hours of practice, all the quiet nights at home, all the love she had poured into her music would finally be shared. Before going to bed, she wrote down a few reminders for herself. Play from the heart. Pause when needed. Feel each moment. Listen to the room. Connect with the people, not just the keys. She pinned the note above her piano, a small guide for her nervous mind. Then she lay down, letting the day's practice settle in her muscles. In her mind and in her heart, she fell asleep dreaming of the wedding hall. She imagined the bride walking slowly, the music guiding her steps, the groom waiting, the guests watching, the silence holding its breath. She imagined herself at the piano, hands poised over the keys, ready to begin. And even in her sleep, she felt the music flowing through her, alive, ready to be shared. The next morning, she woke early again. Today, she would start preparing more seriously, deciding which pieces would fit which moments, how to transition from one melody to another, how to pace herself so that the music felt effortless and natural. She knew that her practice yesterday had given her a foundation. But today, she needed to build the structure that would hold the entire performance together. She started by going through the melodies she had tried the day before, listening to each one carefully. Some would work beautifully for the bride's entrance, slow and soft, almost like a whisper of emotion. Others would suit the moments of laughter and celebration, lively and joyful, lifting the room. She made notes, marking where to pause, where to slow down, where to let the melody breathe. The process was meticulous, but she enjoyed it. Each decision brought her closer to the vision of the wedding she had imagined. Afternoon came, and she felt her confidence growing. She realized that preparation was not just about technical perfection. It was about connecting with the emotions, shaping the music so that it could speak without words. She practiced transitions between pieces, imagining how the music would flow seamlessly from one moment to another. She experimented with small variations, subtle changes in tempo or emphasis, testing how they would affect the feeling of the piece. Even as she worked, her mind wandered to the people she would be playing for. She didn't know them well, but she wanted them to feel something real, something that would stay with them long after the ceremony ended. She wanted her music to be a gift, not just a performance. The thought made her fingers move more gently over the keys, more thoughtfully. Each note became a message, each chord a way to reach the hearts of strangers who had trusted her with a moment they would remember forever. By evening, she felt exhausted but satisfied. She had worked through several pieces, shaped the melodies, practiced transitions, and allowed herself moments of free expression. Her fingers were sore, but her heart was full. She knew that tomorrow would bring more preparation, more fine-tuning, but for now, she could rest with the knowledge that she was ready to take the next step. Before sleeping, she sat at the piano one last time, playing softly, letting the music drift into the quiet apartment. She imagined the wedding hall again, imagining the first note filling the room, imagining the way the silence would follow, holding everyone's attention, making the moment feel sacred. She smiled, feeling a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and anticipation. She was ready to share her music, to let it speak for her, and to see where it would lead. And as she finally closed her eyes and let sleep take her, she carried the melodies in her heart, the rhythms in her mind, and the quiet confidence that she could rise to the occasion. The wedding was approaching, and with each passing day, the music inside her grew stronger, more alive, and more ready to fill a room with beauty emotion, and the unspoken magic that only music could bring. The morning of the wedding arrived with a bright, clear sky. The sun poured through the windows, illuminating her small apartment and making the piano gleam in a way that seemed almost magical. She woke early, the excitement in her chest mingling with a nervous tension that made it hard to breathe at times. Today was the day she had been preparing for, imagining, and dreaming about for weeks. She could feel her heart pounding as she got out of bed. And for a moment, she wondered if she had made a mistake agreeing to play. But that thought was fleeting. She reminded herself of all the hours she had spent preparing, all the melodies she had shaped, all the careful attention to emotion and detail she had poured into her music. She had worked not for recognition, not for applause, but for the love of music itself. And now the music was ready. She was ready. She dressed carefully, choosing something simple and elegant. Clothing that would allow her to move freely, but also fit the formal atmosphere of the wedding. She tied her hair back, brushed her teeth, and took a deep breath. For a moment, she just stood in front of the mirror, looking at herself, feeling the mixture of nervousness and excitement swirling inside. She whispered to herself, "You can do this. You have prepared. You are ready." The words helped, grounding her, giving her courage for the day ahead. When she arrived at the wedding hall, she was struck by the bustle of activity. Flowers were being arranged, tables were being set, and staff moved quickly, making sure everything was perfect. Guests were beginning to arrive, their voices creating a low hum of excitement and conversation. The room was large, grand, filled with light, and she felt a small flicker of doubt creep in. It was bigger than she had imagined. Could she fill the space with her music? Could she make it come alive in a room so full of energy and expectation? She reminded herself to focus, to breathe, to take the room one step at a time. She found the piano in the corner of the hall, a large grand instrument that gleamed under the bright lights. She approached it slowly, running her fingers over the keys without playing. It felt different from her own piano at home, unfamiliar yet inviting. She imagined it as an old friend, waiting patiently for her to speak through it. And that helped calm the fluttering in her stomach as she sat down. She closed her eyes for a moment and let her hands hover over the keys. She could hear the faint sounds of conversation and movement around her, but she let them fade into the background. The music was hers to control. She allowed herself to breathe, to imagine the first note filling the room, and felt a surge of determination. This was her moment, and she would not let fear take it from her. Minutes before the ceremony began, the staff and wedding organizers made their final checks. The guests were starting to take their seats, and the room settled into a quiet anticipation. She glanced at the bride and groom, who were preparing backstage, their faces showing excitement, nerves, and happiness. She wanted to do justice to the moment, to give them a memory that would stay with them forever. That thought steadied her nerves, gave her purpose beyond her own fear or doubt. She started with a soft, gentle melody, testing the acoustics, feeling the way the piano responded under her fingers. The notes sounded richer here, resonating in the large hall, and she allowed herself a small smile. She could do this. She would do this. She imagined the music guiding the bride's steps, comforting the groom, filling the room with an unspoken sense of joy and love. The staff signaled that it was time. Guests quieted, and a hush fell over the room. She could feel the collective attention of everyone, even before the first note. She took a deep breath, letting the anticipation wash over her without letting it overwhelm her. She reminded herself that she had prepared for this moment, that she knew the music, that she could guide the room with her melodies. As the bride began to walk toward the front of the room, she started to play. The first notes were soft, careful, deliberate. They floated in the air, capturing the attention of everyone present. Conversation ceased, and the room seemed to hold its breath. She watched the bride, the slow, measured steps, the nervous excitement in her eyes, and she let the music mirror those emotions. Every note was meant to calm, to uplift. To celebrate, her hands moved with precision and grace, yet each note carried warmth, emotion, and intention. She played not just from memory, but from feeling, letting the music tell the story of the moment. She noticed how people leaned slightly forward, listening intently. Some smiled, others blinked back tears. She had never felt so aware of her audience, so connected to strangers through something so simple and profound. As the bride reached the front of the room, the melody shifted slightly, a gentle rise and fall, carrying the emotions of the moment. She could feel the room responding. The silence between notes felt alive, charged with anticipation. She allowed herself to become fully immersed in the music, her nerves fading into the background as she guided the melody, letting it flow naturally, effortlessly, honestly. She glanced briefly at the groom, seeing his hand reach out for hers, the emotion in his eyes. She could feel the weight of the moment, the importance of what she was doing. The music was no longer just notes. It was a bridge, connecting hearts, holding the room in a shared experience. She adjusted the tempo slightly, allowing the melody to breathe, pausing where emotion needed space to grow. Minutes felt like hours as she played, fully aware of every note, every pause, every nuance. She could hear the subtle shift in the room, the way people's attention focused, the way the energy changed from casual conversation to attentive listening. It was a strange, powerful sensation, to hold so many hearts and minds in a moment created purely from sound. Her confidence grew as she continued. She was no longer playing for herself or for practice. She was playing for everyone in the room, shaping the emotion, guiding the experience. She could see the bride relax slightly, the groom's grip on her hand loosening, replaced by smiles and quiet laughter. The music was working, carrying the feelings she wanted them to feel. Expressing what words could not, she transitioned smoothly from one piece to another, blending melodies, adjusting dynamics, and creating an atmosphere that matched the ebb and flow of the ceremony. Her focus was absolute. She could feel the room's energy, the collective heartbeat of the audience. She moved with it, letting the music rise and fall naturally. Each note was intentional, each pause measured, each chord resonant with emotion. Time seemed to stretch. She could feel her own heartbeat in rhythm with the music. Her hands were steady, her fingers confident, her mind completely present. The fear that had plagued her in the weeks leading up to this day had disappeared, replaced by a deep, calm certainty. She was doing exactly what she was meant to do. She was creating something beautiful, something that mattered, something that would linger in the hearts of everyone present long after the last note faded. As the final piece approached, she could feel the climax building, a gentle crescendo that would carry the room into a moment of shared silence. She played with intention, shaping each phrase, letting the music swell and recede, guiding the emotions, holding the attention. The room was silent except for the piano, every ear tuned to her, every heart feeling the story she was telling. The last note lingered in the air, fading slowly, leaving a silence so profound that it seemed almost tangible. It was not empty silence. It was full, charged with emotion, with connection, with the unspoken understanding of everyone present. She held her hands above the keys for a moment, feeling the resonance of the note in the room, in herself, in the hearts of the listeners. Then, gradually, the room began to stir. Applause erupted, spontaneous, heartfelt, overwhelming. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes. The bride and groom looked at her with wide eyes, expressions of gratitude and awe on their faces. She felt a rush of relief, joy, and pride all at once. She had done it. She had created a moment that mattered, a memory that would stay with them forever. As the applause continued, she allowed herself a small, private smile. She had faced her fears, risen to the occasion, and shared her music in a way she had never imagined possible. The nerves, the anxiety, the long hours of practice they had, all led to this. She realized that the true power of music was not in perfection, but in connection, in emotion, in the ability to touch hearts without a single word. After the applause settled, she remained at the piano, letting the final notes echo in her mind. She glanced around the room, seeing the faces of the guests, the bride and groom, and the quiet smiles of satisfaction. She knew that this was more than a performance. It was a shared experience, a moment of beauty that belonged to everyone who had been present. And in that realization, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The kind that comes only from doing something meaningful. Something that matters. The wedding continued, full of laughter, celebration, and joy. But she carried with her the memory of that first moment at the piano. The way the music had flowed, the way the room had responded, the way silence itself had spoken volumes. She knew that this experience would stay with her forever, shaping her, inspiring her, and reminding her of the power of courage, preparation, and honest expression. The room had quieted once more, the soft hum of conversations fading as attention returned to her. She sat at the piano, hands poised above the keys, feeling the familiar weight of the instrument beneath her fingers. This was the moment she had been imagining for weeks, the culmination of long hours. Careful practice and quiet determination. She could feel the eyes of the audience on her, but instead of fear, she felt a strange calm. The nervous tension had melted into focus, and all that remained was music and emotion. She began with a soft, tentative note, letting it linger in the air. The sound was delicate but precise, the beginning of a story that only she could tell. Slowly, she built on it, adding layer after layer of melody, shaping the music so it flowed naturally, effortlessly. She played not for attention, not for applause, but for the room. For the hearts gathered there, for the emotions she wanted to bring to life. The effect was immediate. Guests leaned forward, eyes widening, drawn into the music as if it had cast a spell. A few people blinked back tears, others held their breath, completely absorbed. She could feel the energy of the room shifting, a wave of shared emotion building quietly but powerfully. Each note was like a word in a sentence, each chord a paragraph, the melody telling a story that no one could put into words. Her fingers moved with a confidence that surprised even her. She was no longer thinking about technique or perfection. She was thinking about feeling, about connection, about the story she wanted to tell through the piano. She let the melody rise and fall, softening here, intensifying there, allowing the music to breathe, to stretch. To carry the emotions of everyone present, the bride and groom stood quietly at the front, their eyes fixed on her. She could feel their anticipation, their nervous excitement, and she let it guide her hands. The music reflected their emotions, perfectly gentle and tender at first, rising into moments of joy, then softening again into quiet, intimate passages. Every note was intentional, every pause meaningful, every chord a way to speak directly to the hearts of those listening. She noticed small reactions in the crowd, a mother wiping her eyes, a friend holding her partner's hand tightly, a child leaning forward with curiosity. The awareness made her even more careful, more deliberate. She wanted each person to feel something personal, something that would stay with them after the wedding ended. She wanted to create an experience that went beyond entertainment, something deeper, more lasting. Time seemed to slow. The world outside the hall ceased to exist. There was only the piano, the music, and the people who were listening. She could feel their emotions blending with her own, the room becoming a living entity of shared experience. She allowed herself to become fully absorbed, letting the music carry her as much as she carried it as the melody progressed. She introduced subtle changes, adding small flourishes that surprised even her. Each variation was carefully considered, meant to evoke feeling, to highlight the importance of the moment. She played with a delicate balance, not rushing, not lingering too long, letting the music flow naturally from one emotion to the next. The room followed her lead, the audience's attention completely captured, their silence speaking louder than any applause could. She felt a surge of joy as she noticed the bride smiling, tears in her eyes, clearly moved by the music. The groom's expression was one of awe, his hand tightening around his partner's in quiet admiration. The connection between them, between all the guests and herself, was palpable. She was no longer just playing notes. She was shaping the emotions of the entire room, guiding them through a shared experience of love, hope, and celebration. As the music reached its midpoint, she allowed herself to explore more expressive passages. Her fingers flew over the keys with a mixture of precision and freedom, creating moments of intensity and release. The melody became richer, more layered, reflecting the complexity of the emotion she wanted to convey. She played with all her heart, pouring into the music everything she felt and imagined for this day. She could feel the energy building in the room. The guests were completely absorbed, their attention fixed on the music, their emotions subtly shifting in response to each phrase. She played a series of notes that rose and fell like waves, each one carrying a different shade of feeling: joy, anticipation, tenderness, excitement. The music became a language of its own, speaking truths that words could never fully capture. At one point, she paused briefly, letting a chord linger in the air. The silence that followed was powerful, almost tangible, filled with emotion and anticipation. It was the kind of silence that makes people hold their breath, lean forward, and feel something deeply, without even realizing it. She allowed herself a small smile, knowing that this was exactly the effect she had hoped for. Music was not just sound. It was emotion, connection, and presence. As she continued, she noticed subtle reactions throughout the room: hands gripping seats, small nods of appreciation, quiet sighs of emotion. She felt a sense of responsibility, not in a heavy way, but in a deeply human one. She was the conduit for something larger than herself, a moment that would remain in memory for years to come. Every note mattered, every pause mattered, every detail mattered. The melody began to rise toward its climax. She allowed herself to feel the full intensity of the moment, letting the music swell, filling the hall with sound and emotion. The notes rang clear and strong, resonating with the audience, carrying a sense of celebration, of triumph, of beauty. She felt her own heart lifted by the music, a reflection of the energy in the room. The connection was complete. The music was alive, and the room was alive with it. She moved into the final section of the piece with a mixture of tenderness and power. The melody softened slightly, allowing space for reflection, then rose again, full of emotion and joy. She played with confidence and grace, knowing that every note, every chord, every pause had its purpose. She was telling a story, guiding the audience through the emotions of the day, and they were responding fully, letting the music shape their experience. The final notes approached, and she allowed herself to savor each one. She played them carefully, deliberately, letting each sound linger just long enough to resonate, just long enough to leave its mark. The last chord hung in the air, a perfect balance of sound and silence. She held it for a moment, feeling the vibration through her fingers, through the room, through herself. Then came the silence. Not empty, not quiet in the ordinary sense, but alive, full of emotion and meaning. It was the kind of silence that holds hearts, that allows people to breathe and feel, that says more than any words could. She remained still, hands poised above the keys, letting the silence speak for her, letting it carry the power of the moment. Slowly, applause began. It started softly, then grew louder, swelling into a wave of appreciation and admiration. The guests stood, clapping, cheering, some wiping tears from their eyes. The bride and groom rushed forward, embracing her with gratitude and joy. She felt a mixture of relief, pride, and happiness, knowing that she had created a memory that would last a lifetime, even as the applause continued. She remained seated for a moment, taking it all in. The music had worked, it had connected, moved, and touched the hearts of everyone in the room. The silence, the notes, the pauses, the crescendos had contributed to something more than a performance. It was a shared experience, a human moment that transcended words. After the applause began to fade, she allowed herself a small, private smile. She had faced fear, embraced the unknown, and let her music speak in a way she had never imagined possible. The hours of practice, the careful planning, the nervous anticipation all had led to this moment, and it had been worth every second. The wedding continued around her, full of laughter, celebration, and joy, but she carried with her the memory of the performance, the way the room had listened, the way silence had spoken, the way music had become a bridge between hearts. She knew that this moment would stay with her forever, shaping her understanding of what it meant to share her gift, to connect through sound and emotion, to create beauty that lingered long after the last note faded. Later, as she packed her things and prepared to leave, She looked back at the piano. It seemed to glow softly under the lights, as if acknowledging her efforts, as if proud of the music it had helped create. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, a quiet joy that comes from knowing you have done something meaningful, something that matters, something that touches the lives of others. Walking out of the wedding hall, she felt lighter, freer, as if the music had not only reached the audience, but had also passed through her, releasing a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying. The day had been a test, a challenge, a chance to share herself in a way that went beyond words, and she had risen to it, fully, honestly, beautifully. She stepped into the evening air, the sun setting behind her, casting long shadows across the street. The world felt brighter somehow, fuller, alive with possibility. She knew that this experience was only the beginning, that music would continue to lead her, challenge her, and connect her with others in ways she had never imagined. She smiled softly, feeling the thrill of potential and the quiet satisfaction of a day well lived. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that this was the moment she had always been waiting for, the moment when her music would not just exist for herself, but for everyone who would listen, feel, and remember. The day after the wedding, she woke up slowly, the sunlight spilling softly across her bedroom floor. Her body ached a little from the long hours at the piano the day before, but the ache was a good kind, a reminder of what she had accomplished. Her mind, however, was awake and alive, replaying the moments from the wedding in vivid detail. Every note, every pause, every silent reaction of the audience played in her mind like a film. She could not stop watching. She remembered the hush as she had begun the first piece, the way people had turned their attention toward the piano as if it were a magnet, the anticipation that had filled the room like electricity. She could still see the bride's smile, the groom's awe, and the tears that some of the guests had discreetly wiped away. She smiled softly to herself. She had known she wanted to create something special, but she had never imagined it would feel this powerful, this transformative. The applause had been overwhelming, but it was the silence that had struck her the most. Not the lack of sound, but the weight of the quiet, the way the room had held its breath, the way every note had landed like a message in the hearts of the listeners. She realized then that music had a language beyond words. It could touch emotions directly, bypassing thoughts and explanations, reaching into the core of a person's being. She had experienced it, and so had everyone in that room. She got out of bed and walked over to the piano in her apartment, touching the keys lightly. It felt familiar, comforting, yet different after what had happened yesterday. It was as if the piano knew, as if it carried a quiet pride, echoing the feelings of the room from the day before. She played a soft chord, letting the sound linger, and felt herself smiling again. She had done more than perform. She had shared a piece of herself, and in doing so, she had grown. Throughout the morning, messages and calls came in. Friends and family congratulated her, expressing amazement at how she had handled the performance. Some of them had attended the wedding and shared their experiences, describing the way the music had moved them. Others had heard about it from people who had been there, speaking in awe of the young pianist who had captured a room with her playing. She listened quietly, feeling warmth spread through her chest. The recognition was gratifying, but it was secondary. What mattered most was knowing that she had created an emotional experience that people would remember. Later that day, she began to reflect more deeply. She realized that the wedding had changed her in ways she had not anticipated. She had faced fear and nervousness, transformed them into focus and creativity, and emerged stronger, more confident. For the first time, she truly understood what it meant to share her gift with others, to let something so personal become a bridge to human connection. She felt a quiet pride, not arrogance, not boastfulness, but a steady, reassuring knowledge that she was capable of more than she had allowed herself to believe. She thought about the small decisions she had made in her preparation, the moments of doubt, the careful shaping of each melody. Every choice had mattered. Every pause, every dynamic, every note had contributed to the power of the performance. It was not just skill or technique. It was thought, intention, and heart. She realized that music in its truest form required all of these things, and in that realization she found not only confidence but also inspiration. She wanted to keep playing, to keep learning, to keep sharing her music in ways that mattered. The next few days were filled with reflection, planning, and quiet moments of joy. She replayed the wedding in her mind, imagining new possibilities for her music, thinking about how she could continue to reach people in meaningful ways. Invitations to play at other events began to come in small gatherings at first, then slightly larger ones. Each time, she approached the opportunity with thoughtfulness, remembering what had worked and what had moved people at the wedding. She was learning not only how to play, but how to connect, how to guide emotion, how to create experiences that resonated deeply. In the evenings, she returned to her piano at home, experimenting with new melodies, exploring variations of pieces she had already mastered, and improvising to see where her creativity would take her. Her confidence was growing, but it was grounded in respect for her craft, for the emotions she wanted to evoke, and for the people who would listen. She was no longer just practicing for herself. She was practicing for the moment when her music would touch others, for the lives it could affect, for the hearts it could reach. One afternoon, she received a letter from the bride, handwritten and filled with emotion. It expressed gratitude for the performance, describing how the music had made the ceremony unforgettable, how it had moved everyone in the room, and how it had created memories that would last a lifetime. Reading the letter, she felt tears welling in her eyes. It was one thing to hear praise from friends or family, but to know that she had touched someone's life in such a deep and lasting way was profoundly moving. She carefully placed the letter on her piano, a reminder of what music could do when shared with intention and heart. Her personal growth was not limited to music. She began to notice a change in the way she approached challenges in other areas of her life. The courage it had taken to face her fears, to perform in front of strangers, and to embrace the uncertainty of the wedding day had given her a quiet confidence that seeped into everyday moments. She found herself speaking up more, taking risks she might have avoided before, trusting in her own abilities in ways she had never done. The experience had expanded not just her musical world, but her entire perspective on life. Months passed, and her reputation as a pianist began to grow. She was invited to play at weddings, small concerts, and community events. Each time, she approached the performance with the same care, same thoughtfulness, the same intention to connect and move her audience. She was learning, evolving, discovering new ways to express herself through her music. And each time, she remembered the wedding, the hush, the silence, the way the music had carried emotion, the way it had touched hearts, and she used that memory as a guide. Despite the growing recognition and opportunities, she remained humble. She knew that her skill and talent were gifts, but that they were only truly meaningful when shared with intention, honesty, and heart. She continued to practice, to explore new pieces, to experiment with melodies and rhythms, always seeking the deeper emotional connection in her music. She wanted to continue creating moments that mattered, experiences that would linger long after the notes faded, in quiet moments. She would sit at the piano and reflect on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the early mornings, the late nights, the doubts and fears, and the small victories along the way. She thought about how far she had come, not in terms of skill alone, but in terms of courage, presence, and understanding. She had learned that music was more than sound. It was a way to communicate, to connect, and to leave a lasting impact on others. One evening, she played softly in her apartment. She realized how much she had grown emotionally. She no longer played only for herself, but for the stories she could tell, the hearts she could reach, the moments she could create. Each note was intentional, each pause deliberate, each melody shaped to convey emotion and meaning. She smiled, understanding that her journey had only just begun, and that the possibilities ahead were endless. Her music became a bridge between herself and others, between emotions that were difficult to express and the people who felt them. She discovered that even the smallest performances could have profound effects, that music could create shared experiences and memories that words could not. She embraced this understanding fully, letting it guide her as she continued to grow, both as a pianist and as a person. Over time, she began teaching others, sharing not only technical skills but also her philosophy, that music was about feeling, connection, and honesty. She encouraged her students to explore, to experiment, to find their own voices, and to understand that music could speak in ways nothing else could. She realized that her own journey, starting from that wedding performance, had equipped her with insights that were valuable and worth sharing. Looking back, she could see how transformative that single event had been. A wedding invitation, a room full of strangers, and a piano had become the catalyst for change in her life. She had faced fear, embraced the unknown, shared her gift, and discovered the power of connection through music. She had learned that courage, preparation, and intention could transform not only a moment, but an entire life, even now. She sometimes closed her eyes and imagined the wedding hall, the hush of the crowd, the first note lingering in the air, and the silence that followed. It was a memory that remained vivid and precious, a reminder of what was possible when one embraced fear, worked hard, and allowed their heart to guide their hands. She smiled, knowing that it had changed her forever, giving her the confidence to continue creating, sharing, and touching lives through the music she loved.